Hi, I'm Brother Kerry, and this is our Communications 370 class, Media, Law, and Ethics. I am very excited to be here today. The students a bit nervous. Today, our groups are presenting in front of a panel, and that panel is a Utah State Senator John Johnson, Professor Paul Kerry from Brigham Young University, and Kim Coleman, an adjunct faculty member here. And they're presenting on free speech and the issues surrounding that. And we're going to get started.
Today we would like to talk a little bit about why we believe in the free speech clause in the First Amendment. After taking lots of time this semester to be able to research and understand more fully what this clause has and the importance of it, we believe that, as stated right here, that the free speech clause should remain as currently written because it's written for the Constitution and our government were built for the people. And we believe that the way the free speech clause is currently written allows us to have the main protection against government overreach. And so today we'd like to talk a little bit about compelling interests and some of the due process, as long as the main aspect that we love and found in it, which really has to do with the main protection against our government overreach and how that's broken down.
Yes. So first, I'd like to talk about the censorship. We believe that changing the First Amendment can cause a censorship by the government. Over the time, the U.S. Supreme Court has interpreted the First Amendment to have robust protection for the speech, but by modifying it, the First Amendment to narrow the scope of the protection of the freedom speech can cause to a slippery slope where more and more speech are unacceptable, and eventually government can have a control over our speech. So that is why we believe that changing the First Amendment can limit this flexibility so that we cannot express our thoughts and opinions.
But shouldn't certain things be censored? Like in Utah, just this past legislative session, they passed a sensitive materials bill which would require certain books to be pulled out of our public schools. Isn't that appropriate?
Yes, I think the strength of the First Amendment is the judiciary's ability to interpret the First Amendment and apply the broader principles to each cases in specifically. So if the government has compelling interest and to cause national security or direct them to legal action or cause harmful intention, I think they have the ability to censor the certain content.
So is there then a difference between protections for adults versus minors?
Over content?
On content. So if the government is censoring harmful materials, which has included pornography or age inappropriate sexualized material, is that not protected for the student or the content provider?
So one of the things that the government has brought to pass is COPA, which tries to help protect minors in this case from things. There's also the CAN-SPAM Act as well that has tried to protect minors as well as many other people from harmful acts and malicious acts when it comes to data privacy as well as just privacy in general when it comes to free speech and freedom of expression. And so, yes, there are certain extents to protections and lines when it comes to minors and adults, where COPA defines minors to children 13 years of or younger, whereas other regulations, they tend to define minors much older, where it's 17 and younger.
So you mentioned harm, where the government would step in and remove harmful materials or protect children from harmful materials, and everybody agrees on what's harmful.
Not necessarily. And so that's where Section 230 comes into play, where there's providers and platforms. It's up to the platform on what they determine what would be harmful to the user, and it's up to the platform what they deem should be removed from their platform.
Okay.
That makes no sense because President Biden said he would sign legislation banning TikTok.
TikTok.
But he's also advertising on TikTok. If it's that bad, how can you have both sides of that story?
With that case, it's looking at a different case, I believe, where the driver for TikTok being banned, I believe, is more of data. They're looking at free speech, not necessarily in this case, but they're looking at what data is being leaked or what data is being used. Right now, a lot of data is being used, and that's the case in this, is what I believe. The California, Utah, Colorado, Texas, Oregon have all passed legislation around consumer data and consumer data privacy acts. And that's where we're following Europe in their line of consumer data privacy with a GDPR. And so we're all following, and that's where they're trying to limit TikTok.
So Vincenzo, why shouldn't parents be the ones who decide whether or not they want their kids on TikTok? Why do we need Uncle Sam dictating whether or not they can get on TikTok?
Because I think every parent have a different opinion, and it's okay, but at the same time, the laws are created, or the Constitution is created to protect the ones who don't have a voice, and in this case, could be the minors. So if a parent decides to do something that is harm to the children, or allow something that is against the rights of the children, at the same time, we are giving this option to the parent just because he is the parent.
Well, maybe you have parents who just aren't very engaged and they're not paying attention, or maybe they're not informed, and maybe they just won't protect their children as parents. So maybe it just makes sense for the government to then just do that job for everybody.
No, because so the freedom of speech is created to give you the option to think in a different way or to express your opinions, but at the same time, to have a balance, we need to make sure we protect, or we kind of protect the ones who don't have a voice, like I said. So if you don't want to protect your children, the government have to do it for your children because he don't have a voice to protect himself in this case.
So you think that the government should step in just because not every parent's going to do a good job parenting?
That could be one reason, but I believe it's important for the balance of everything. So if you don't protect, for example, when we talk about minority groups, if you don't protect the minority groups, if you don't give them the ability to talk and to be protected, it's gonna be harm to the system because they need the right to talk.
Yeah, kind of with that, one thing that I believe is the government in general should not be able to interfere or interact with any speech in general without any unjustifiable reasoning. And so if they have a reasoning and data proven in which they need to interfere, then they can come in and make changes. However, when we look at the world we live in right now, there's hundreds of things that are harmful to us, but are still legal. And the government has put regulations on, maybe not exactly, I don't say freedom of speech, but, for example, like movies, there's rated R movies. No kid can be able to go into a rated R movie without the permission of their parent at their side. And the reason for that is because they know that that is not meant for that kid, or that person, whoever is entering in under that age, that it was rated for. And so with the approval of their parents, then they are able to go in there, but not just on their own.
Doesn't that undercut your argument? Because TikTok, even if the parents are okay with their child being on TikTok, you're saying government can ban it. But with a rated R movie, if the parents say it's okay, they can go see it. It's nice to be able to play both sides of an issue.
It is.
Well, I believe that the government can remove or have control in good faith if they're asking like objectionable thing or sexual content or obscenity. They can have a censorship over the content in Section 230. But I think that instead of direct the government control over the content, we believe that having regulations on a platform allows those platforms to have their own moderation strategies, rather than government controlling everything that what we speak or what user can speak on the platform. So that is why we believe that keeping the current First Amendment as it is can allow people to speak freely. That is why we don't want government to overreach even on the social platforms.
But our founders probably, had no idea about TikTok or social media. So maybe the First Amendment didn't quite capture everything it should have, not knowing the future.
I think that's where the public square has been adapted to encompass social media as well today. Where the public square previously was literally the public square. Previously, the public square for me was just hanging out with my friends on the streets. My parents didn't really watch me as I went and hung out with my friends. And today they don't really watch me when I go onto social media and just go onto my Facebook groups or just interact with my wife when we message back and forth reels. Like, it's just the public square now. And so that's what's in debate as to if there should be restrictions on the public square. That's up in the courts right now. That's with the Supreme Court. And so that's what's so great about the Bill of Rights and the judicial review right now is that it can be adapted for today. It's the Constitution, it's a living document. It's not just there and stagnant. It's adaptive through the years and the years to come.
Okay, guys, great job. Thank you.
Okay. The ethical reason why we believe free speech should stay the same, the biggest reason, like according to my research, 73% of people, they are happy with the free speech and they think it's protected. And another big reason is instead of changing it to more strict or more loose, we also found out that people are less and less aware of what free speech clause is. Like almost 20% of people, like they can't even name one of the first amendments, like free speech or like free together, things like that. So that's why we believe that instead of just try to change it and go through all the legal process, the government or the people need to increase their awareness.
But Lulu, let's say only 2% of the American people like the free speech clause.
If only 2%?
Yeah, like
like
you're
it?
saying, well, 73% like it, so let's keep it around. But what if only 2% of the American people liked it? What if the rest thought we've got to do something about hate speech? We have to do something about defamation. Would that change your position?
Yeah, of course, because my point is most people agree with it and most people think it's protected and most people feel like they have the freedom to speak. But if people don't feel that way, then it needs to be changed but the reason it convinced me is because most people are happy with it.
We also believe that if you have issues, you can work with the government, your local officials, through courts or through suggestions to be able to, like you said, Brother Kerry, if only 2% agrees to keep it, then that means 98% don't. And so we want to work with the government to be able to make those changes, to give them their voice of speech to talk to the government, but also give them their voice of speech to share their mind and share their thoughts of what they believe can be changed or be better for America.
Ethan, just on that point,
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting what you say. I think if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying we have provisions to be able to change the Constitution if only 2% of the people agree. But it's fascinating that when you speak, you say, we can work with the government to do that. There is no government separated from you, right? You are the people.
Yes.
So to say, well, we'll work with them to change it seems to give a kind of power and authority to the government that's not really justly derived. It has to derive from you. So if only 2% of the people agree, people can work through, of course, representatives to change the Constitution. States can work together to do that. But I think we have to always be careful not to somehow think the government is some separate entity that just kind of floats up there and exercises all of this power, and we're kind of helpless against that. The Constitution, I think, is designed to not give that impression, to say, you have that right. Maybe just one other point. I appreciated in the last presentation, there was a great deal in their paper about relying on historical precedent. And one of the things, they talk about the Enlightenment in this previous paper. In your paper, it's very policy-oriented. Historically, the reason why you have free speech, and I notice in both papers that gets morphed into freedom of expression. And there are, of course, reasons why this would be freedom of expression.
Yeah.
But what would you say, historically speaking, and it doesn't come up in your piece because this doesn't exist anymore, but historically, governments had the right to protect themselves. So even in the 18th century, when this is framed, those framers and founders were worried they were offending the majesty of the king. That's what would have them hanged. This idea of lèse-majesté, that is, you have offended the majesty. Voltaire thought this, Kant thought this, great Enlightenment thinkers who informed the framing of something like this. Is there anything at all that's left over of that? Should we have does free speech allow us to offend government? What do you think?
Yeah, thank you for your words and for your question. I think, first of all, in the Constitution, we believe that the government is part of the people. It says that we the people. And I think that's very important we should like to state and to understand that the government is part of the people, and that the government shouldn't try to backtrack or work for themselves, but to work for and with us as citizens and as the people they're trying to protect, to trying to serve, and to trying to better overall. Because as they help and protect us, the future will grow and be better. So I think that as we continue to build our government, we don't need to rely on the government protecting the government, but for the government to help build and protect the youth and to protect us as citizens, whether it be our speech or our freedom of expression.
So your paper lists unprotected speech that is not protected, including incitement, fighting words, threats. I would put somewhere in there harassment. It usually is coupled with threats. And so why isn't hate speech included there? Because hate speech could lead to incitement, fighting words, threats, and harassment. So why don't you have hate speech here? Why wouldn't you consider that something that should not be protected?
Well, as you said, they could lead to incitement and could lead to those other things, but hate speech itself, though it is offensive, though it can cause, emotional harm or something like that, it in and of itself doesn't pose enough of a danger for it to be unprotected. Professor Kerry was talking about how historically, you couldn't offend the government, or you could say something. If you look at the Salem witch trials, sometimes people were put on trial simply for saying something that offended someone else. And so if we put hate speech as something unprotected, then that's one more big step towards you can't say something if it offends me or hurts my feelings.
Isn't it dangerous in and of itself?
To a degree, but I believe that really to protect the freedoms of people and the rights of people and opportunities for that growth, there is some element of risk.
We have record numbers of teenage suicide. We have record numbers of teenage anxiety. And they all say the same thing. It's because people are using their speech on social media to target them. So when you say, well, there's no consequence, how do you explain that to parents who have lost a child that are now at record numbers? It's so bad our Congress is considering banning a social media platform.
I wouldn't say that there's...
What's the magic line before we say this has to stop?
I wouldn't say there's no consequence for hate speech. There absolutely is. But we also can't say that there's all of these suicides and they're only because of speech on social media. It's solely because of what was being said, because someone said something mean. When it comes to mental health and issues like that, there's so many contributing factors that you can't tunnel vision and say, it's because we allowed hate speech on social media, that's why my brother's dead.
Well, but what if it's just a contributor? Maybe it's the thing that puts someone over.
If it is the thing that puts someone over, I think that if you're targeting hate speech as the solution, you're just hacking away at the leaves, and the issue is something much deeper.
You know, something that was said a little bit earlier bothers me just a little bit, and that was this idea of if the majority thinks this, then we should do this. And we're a constitutional republic for reason, and that is that these rights are set forward to protect the individuals from the government, right, and from somebody else's opinion, right. These rights are natural rights; they're endowed by God. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so what do you think? Why does that figure into this, right? I mean, if you think about the tyranny of the majority, in some respects, right? How does the First Amendment protect us from that tyranny?
My understanding of the First Amendment, like you said, it protects individuals. And so when individuals start to use that right and take it to an extreme where it infringes on someone else's free speech right, that causes a danger. And I don't necessarily, I think this is, our stance can kind of vary a little bit as far as, if it was a majority, then we'd want to change it. I don't necessarily agree, because even a majority can make decisions that are harmful to individuals and communities. And I believe that just the free speech amendment or the clause, as well as other bills of rights, they protect, like you said, individuals. They protect each of us. And as with other principles and other unalienable rights, when you cross bounds where you profess to use that right, but it's infringing on someone else, you've crossed a line. That's like if you were to use hate speech to cause incitement, you've crossed a line from protected speech to unprotected speech. And so when you cross those lines, that's when there is power to step back and put regulations on what you're doing.
Okay, great job, guys.
Okay, thank you for coming. This is our group. My name is Mason Rose, and I'm from Utah.
My name is Lizzie Sear, and I'm from Oregon.
And then I'm Yusuke Maeda. I'm from Japan.
Hi, my name is Alex Moscoso, and I'm from Lima, Peru. So, to talk about free speech, first we need to understand why this is so important. And one of the reasons why free speech and the First Amendment clause is so important is because it protects a variety of classes of speech, including religious speech, commercial speech, and political speech. So, and all of these, like the freedom of speech, is essential for us to, as a society, feel like we are safe and also feel like we are healthy and growing.
Yes, along with that, I came from the background growing up in Japan, and Japan is a democratic country, but it has like a stricter restriction to when it comes to free speech. So I really respect the point of view that every individual has the free expression of their thought, and then promoting like the open conversation is like a really great point. That we should keep how the free speech clause should be as is.
In our paper, we outlined a few of the unprotected forms of unprotected speech, including incitement, child pornography, defamation, and so those are further outlined in our paper. But as the Constitution stands, we agree with it, and that doesn't mean there can't be laws that we don't agree with. Yeah.
So, Lizzie,
Yeah.
should public schools should our 12th grade high schools be able to ban books in their libraries if they disagree with the content? We just had a school in Davis County ban the Bible. Is that okay?
That's a loaded question. Well, this is something that I have actually been thinking on for a long time.
Then we expect a great answer.
I know, right? And yet it might still be lacking. But where I stand, I think that diversity in education is essential for students to grow up. One of my favorite things about Ensign College is that we are so diverse. And sometimes that comes in the form of unpopular ideas. So if I understand correctly, the Bible was banned for obscenity. And taken as a whole, I think they agree that as a whole it's not obscene. But there are some banning of books where it's because of ideas or because of history that maybe we're not proud of. And for that, I don't agree with that. And it's a difficult topic, especially if you live in a region that maybe agrees or disagrees with certain ideas. I'm from Oregon, and right now there's a lot of ideas floating around about, well, I think it's actually more than an idea right now, but whether they should be teaching in health class about gender changing, and if they should be encouraging that. And I'm not a parent, but from a parent's standpoint, I'm like, do I agree with that? Do I agree with the general public? And that's one of the things that's kind of making me on the fence with, should things just be banned because the population agrees?
You know, there's an interesting case the Supreme Court just decided this year. It was a case called 303 Creative, and it was a website company in Colorado that was being sued because they wouldn't build websites for gay weddings. And the Supreme Court actually decided that another issue, which you talked about, freedom of thought, right? That you can't have compelled thought. And it basically, the case really centered on this idea of compelling people to think a certain way. And the whole debate that we had this last session on DEI departments at universities and whether that crossed the line into compelling people to think a certain way or to acting a certain way. And so what do you think about that in terms of the free speech clause? Because it really is related to that. Just kind of.
Mason, why don't you tackle that?
Yeah. I believe, going along with the free speech clause in that case, that photography company is a private company. And I know that they own their own rights to turn down different people. And I know there are certain things you can't discriminate for, and I can't remember if sexuality is one of them. But I think that's a part of the importance of differing opinions. is that's what the country was founded on, and people willing to have different opinions and reject different things helps people learn and grow from that experience to lead to different cases or maybe different bills to help change things.
So what about the protected classes of people when it comes to discrimination, where you just said if you're a private business owner, you should be able to say who you want to serve and not serve? So where are we in this country? How do you think that ultimately comports with the First Amendment then? How far does that right go?
I guess to choosing who they get to serve in that.
There's a bar, I guess. Is it, Brother Kerry? There's a bar in Salt Lake City that is now saying it would restrict serving certain people based on their ideas and expressions. Anti-Zionists, and have you heard about that?
Yeah.
So.
I would still agree with that. I think that is if it's different ideas, that's something that people can disagree with. That's something that everyone has differences with. That's the short answer.
So if Facebook wanted to keep all members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints from expressing their opinions, you'd be okay with that?
I wouldn't be okay with it personally, but I think from a political side, they should be allowed to do that.
Okay, well, how about this? We learned that Elon Musk bought Twitter, and in the course of opening up all the records, found out that the government had a role in advising Twitter to shut down misinformation. So does the government, is it okay for the government to protect us against misinformation?
Somebody besides Mason answer that.
Well, specifically in that case too, they suppressed the Hunter Biden laptop story,
And political, right?
which actually later was found out to be a true story, right?
Well, I mean, as a group, we all have different opinions, that too. So like, my personal opinion, I do not believe that Facebook should be able, or any platform should be able to censor information. Just because...
Is there a difference between Facebook making the choice or the government imposing on Facebook to make the government's choice for Facebook?
So technically, Facebook, it is a private entity, and I know that it's protected to decide whether they have content in their platform or not. But because of the variety of people that are on that platform and the amount of people that are on that platform, that it doesn't only exclude to the United States, but it's all over the world, they should have a different type of clause to have that information included. Because if we decide to take information that doesn't agree with us, or that it doesn't agree with our opinions, or it's just because we don't like a candidate or something like that, we create misinformation around the world. So we don't let people actually understand how the situation is in the country, and we don't let people also have the knowledge to decide whether they want to vote for a person or not, because they don't have both sides of the story. They technically are just speaking one side of the story, and that's what they are showing.
Well, but during COVID, when a lot of this stuff happened, wouldn't it be harmful for the speech that was saying you take a different kind of drug, use ivermectin or use different things, or don't get vaccinated? Wouldn't that just harm people?
I mean, technically, everybody has their own decision and their own willingness to resonate with the information and make a decision based on the information they get. If they don't get both sides of the story, for a person to decide whether they want to get vaccinated or not, like, you're taking that choice away from them because they don't have all of that information.
I have one question for you, Suki, and that is, you said that the laws here in the United States with free speech are different than in Japan.
Yes.
And that you're able to say maybe more things here. But tell me one of the benefits
The benefit?
in Japan from having more restrictions on free speech.
Okay. I think when it comes to like the government has the more power to restrict your speech when it comes to like the hurtful it could be hurtful like the citizens. So in that case, it's I guess same thing again, but promotes your opinion, diversity. Along with that, I really appreciate having those diversity in this here, and then hearing. So it will promote the educational benefit to us, hearing different perspective from everyone, and those promoting those exchanging perspective view will be benefit, I think.
Okay, good job, guys. Thank you for this.
I'm Kayla. I'm from Florida.
I'm Ruby. I'm from Peru.
I'm Gerald from Bolivia.
And I'm Gabriela. I am from Venezuela.
Our entire argument is based off of this quote by founding father Benjamin Franklin. And he says, "Whoever would overthrow the liberty of a nation must begin by subduing the freeness of speech." He was a renowned innovator and a founding father, and it's because we agree with him that we move to maintain freedom of speech precisely as written. So the founding fathers, this all began when the monarchy was controlling their actions, their taxes, their speech, everything. And they felt like they had no room to express themselves. And so by overthrowing the British monarchy and creating this First Amendment, they protected freedom of expression and freedom of speech for the people. And this goes along with the ethical theory of utilitarianism. So utilitarianism moves that the benefit for the most amount of people is what will be provided to the people.
Let me just, for the judges, so they know, the two people on your left, they took the position of leave the free speech clause the way it is. The two people on the right, Gerald and Gabby, both said, no, we need more regulation. And what I thought was interesting, and I share this with the panel, is that you could make the argument that Gerald and Gabby have both come from countries, Bolivia and Venezuela, that have suffered greatly because of speech.
Tyranny. A little bit of tyranny in at least one of those.
So, Gerald, why are you saying these more restrictions?
Okay, so we started at the beginning with that position that I need more restrictions, but it's not restrictions, it's more regulation. It's not like a limit, it's regulate better what things are said.
Restrictions, the regulations. That's you, a good politician.
Well, I was looking at the definition of limit and regulate, and limit is like stop something, and regulate is different to limit. It doesn't stop something, it gives a better flow. And something that we decided is to implement media literacy in schools, because are we really helping children by limit content? Are we really helping children by banning books? I don't think so. They need more information.
So, Gabby, in Venezuela, do you think free speech helped preserve? Venezuela was the richest, most prosperous country in South America.
Yes.
You changed governments under Chavez and Maduro. Now it's the poorest. They're going into zoos and stealing animals so they can eat at night. Did free speech help protect your freedom or help bring the country down?
So, to limit speech, how they are doing it in Venezuela, it is like harming the people. Because in the way they are doing it, it is that they cannot speak at all against the government. Like if they speak something bad about the government, it has like immediate consequence. Like for example, like the military can go to your home and intimidate. It could be your family, friends, and people that are related to you. And or if you have a business, they are the military are allowed to take down your business for that.
Are those lines really clear? What is offensive to the government and what's not?
Well, they have not said that clearly, like on the.
They just decide case by case and
Mhm.
show up at your house.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd like to go back to the premise of the argument, utilitarianism, which I found startling that this would be the premise, especially that you say utilitarianism supports the common good. The common good is something that utilitarianism really doesn't get to. The common good lies outside, I think, of the instruments that utilitarianism has to get at it. Now, you mentioned Skokie here, the famous case, of course, where racial bigots, neo-Nazis wanted to march through Skokie, Illinois, where there were Holocaust survivors. It's precisely during the Third Reich and the Holocaust that we see utilitarianism applied. It's the idea that if we determine that you are not useful, if there's a person of particular use or skill, that person deserves a better percentage of society's, say, protection. So when the Third Reich decides we don't see those with disabilities as particularly useful, they had big posters put up. You know, here's a person in an asylum for health. They're not useful. The food that they receive and everything else that they get to support their lives could go to a working class family. And they would put a certain amount of money, 60,000 Reichsmarks could support this family instead of this one person who has a disability. That's utilitarianism. Whereas the common good argument would argue every person has inherent dignity and is equal, regardless of what they represent, where they come from, any kind of ability or disability. There's an equality there. How did you end up on utilitarianism? It seems to go back to something we've heard in that earlier argument about if a greater number of people like this, then excellent, we'll keep it. But if not, we'll have to change this. It's a deep philosophy that I think doesn't get to where you want to go to in this. Ruby, why don't you take that?
Okay. We believe that even though people don't have different opinions, they can be racist, discriminative. They have the right to speak what they want. It might look wrong, it might not be moral, but ethical, but it protects everybody from saying what they want. At the end, what the founding fathers wanted is for everybody to have the freedom to say whatever, because in the case the government decided to do something wrong, we would have the power to speak up and defend ourselves just like they did to the independence. We might not have choose a good definition, but it's for the good of everybody. Even though, let's say, the whole country says this might not be protecting us, we have to understand why we decided to have this clause, this amendment in the beginning. It might not feel right to have pornography be legal, but if we are protecting the content, so in a moment of chaos and the government being, I want to do whatever I want, if we have the power to defend ourselves and then have the rights to promote content against them, then it's okay.
And I would say everything you've said, or just about everything you've said, you can arrive at without utilitarian philosophy. You don't need a philosophy of a person's utility, that they have a better function. Everything you've said can be gotten from the Constitution. You don't need to introduce Jeremy Bentham and utilitarian philosophy to make that argument. I just don't see that connection being effective.
My name is Gabriela Macias. I'm from Dallas, Texas.
I'm Daniel Harmon. I'm from Santan Valley, Arizona.
I'm Logan Page. I'm from Layton, Utah.
Okay. So we decided that we would want the freedom of speech to remain the same because we believe that our founding fathers, although it was a vague description of freedom of speech, it allows for us to have the freedoms that we have now. And we do like the ambiguity. We like it because it allows for judicial review.
Gabby, in your paper, you say when the Founding Fathers wrote the First Amendment, they understood the importance of the free flow of ideas. The world has changed, right? Like now, with the push of a button, not only do we have instantaneous communication, we have global communication. Shouldn't we amend the amendment to address that or take that into consideration? Before, you could tell your neighbor. Now you can tell a whole school. You can tell a whole community.
I think that it only adds to the free flow of ideas. It only adds for the potential of expression. Now we don't need weeks to wait for the news to get by newspaper to the other side of the city. It could be within seconds that your ideas are expressed through not only your country but throughout other countries. Does that answer your question, Brother Kerry?
What about bad ideas?
I think bad ideas are just as valid as good ones.
Or at least you're saying, I think what you mean is they may not be just as valid, but they have the right to the platform. People have a right to express.
That's exactly what I'm saying, Doctor.
But yeah, going off Gabby's point about the Founding Fathers, the Founding Fathers were super critical of the King of England at the time. They were so critical that they had the Revolutionary War. They realized that they wanted to keep those rights for future citizens of America. So they put the free speech clause there as one of the most important clauses in the First Amendment. That's why it's part of the First Amendment.
Just so you know, sometimes we say, oh, they had no free speech. Remember that the Constitution is built on the Anglo-American legal tradition out of the common law. There already is some area of freedom of religion. Parliament can pass acts on that. There already was the ability to speak. So while they couldn't offend, and there are certain libel cases that are very different in US law, we have to always remember there is that longer tradition within England specifically that many had already looked to. So in some ways you could say the Founding Fathers developed the inheritance that they received and turned it into the Constitution, and particularly this free speech clause. So we don't always see it as opposed, like they had nothing. This came out of nowhere, right? This developed, we drew on their traditions and expanded them.
Yeah, the traditions and the people they studied.
Sure. And kind of going off of that, that the Founding Fathers also knew from other governments and societies throughout history, not just with Great Britain, that if you give, it's kind of thing, if you give someone an inch, they'll take a mile. And they knew that giving government this power to restrict free speech in any way would eventually lead to government being able to restrict free speech in any way they saw fit, whoever was in power at that time. And the Founding Fathers felt that it was better for bad ideas to be given the same to be given the same platform as good ideas. Like, it's better to have old Farmer Joe down the road being angry at the local government than it would be to have that local government instantly like silence them for whatever their opinion is.
But Daniel, you have two public officials, Kim Coleman and John Johnson. Under our defamation laws, you can show up and lie about them. You can say horrible things that you know are untrue and get away with it.
And people did.
And people did.
Even the Salt Lake
What the
Tribune.
founding fathers envisioned? Like, I should be able to say things that I know are untrue because I want to get a political advantage. Is that what the founding fathers envisioned?
It's an excellent question.
Okay, how about Gabby or Logan? Is that free speech? I can lie about people without consequence?
Yeah, I'd say yes.
Well, I'm not lying about you. Promise, no.
All right. Fair enough. Yeah, I think that the answer would be yes. I think they knew that people would lie, but they also knew that a lot of people would still tell the truth, and it would help regulate this government that was for us, for the people.
Can the government lie about you? You can lie about the government. Can the government lie about you? Because that's also happened.
There are certain positions, public officials have different rights than, or kind of relinquish themselves in the public view, rather than other people. Like, if I start spouting lies about Genevieve, it's okay as long as it's not defamation, as long as it's not hurting her livelihood, as long as it's not causing her any type of harm. I mean, emotional harm, I'm sorry, you're going to have to feel it. But to her well-being. To go along with that, we cited a case of a man who was in the public square just spouting foul language at a marshal. And the court found that in that foul language, it wasn't only foul language, but it was also fighting words. When it gets to that point, then it is protected speech. And it's what's called it is harmful for the security of other people.
What an incredible class. You know, education is not just about what you hear and learn, it's about leaving your comfort zone and going into the learning zone, and that's what happened today. Please consider applying to Ensign College. Visit or click the link below.